A 14-year-old girl is in the hospital after being shot by police in Florida last week. Police say the girl, along with a 12-year-old boy, broke into a home stocked with multiple firearms after running away from a foster home. Body cam footage released last Tuesday shows the children, both of whom are white, repeatedly shooting at officers who can be heard urging calm in the chaotic situation.
Put the gun down now! Hey guys, just hold behind hard cover. Let's not shoot these kids, man. Let's just hold them up. Take our time. 10-4, they're shooting at me. Hold the air. I'm code 4. She's re-racking around inside the shotgun. All right, let's not engage them anymore. Let's not challenge them. Just hold behind hard cover. We're just going to hang out here.
That lasted almost an hour before the police returned fire, seriously injuring the girl. The boy, armed with an AK-47, was able to surrender without injury, according to police. The incident has many wondering why officers can't show this sort of restraint when dealing with children of color. Adam Toledo was told to put his hands up and killed a fraction of a second later. Tamir Rice was shot within 2 seconds of cops arriving at the playground he was playing at, and the list goes on. Joining me now to discuss, BNC's legal contributor and veteran prosecutor Paul Henderson. All right, so Paul, after this story broke, people just knew these kids had to be white. Your take?
Well, I think it was obvious, and also if you listen to the tone and the engagement and the conversations in that case where he's saying, hey, let's not engage, let's not confront, let's just hang out, and he's all calm. A lot of that is the subjective interpretation, and it's hard when you're looking at these cases one by one because each case is different and they're fact specific. But the bigger picture, if we take a step back, we have to acknowledge the race disparities that are built into policing encounters. Now, these are just facts. We already know, looking at objective facts and statistics, African Americans are 3 times more likely to have this type of lethal force engaged on them when they encounter police departments, and it goes up to 5 times more when it's an African American male. And again, if that's not enough to show and prove to audiences that there are race disparities in policing, you can just look at use of force, because we know that there it's 19.3% times higher for use of force to be employed against African American and communities of color when law enforcement, when they are engaged. And we really have to acknowledge that this is a problem. And this case that we're just talking about right now is proof that we see that there can be policing and engagement that is not confrontational. There can be policing and engagement that doesn't end in lethal outcomes for children or other people, but that doesn't seem to be the case in a lot of the cases that you were just identifying. And that's not the case when we look statistically as proof that engagements with communities of color yield a higher percentage for lethal outcomes and race disparities in terms of use of force and how people encounter law enforcement. Those are just facts. That's just the truth, Yodit.
Well, you know, I don't want anybody thinking that we're making light of what happened here. I mean, white or black, a child was shot by the police, and she was clearly, you know, she came from a home, she had a troubled history, but both children lived in a group home, and the sheriff's office had said that it had responded to nearly 300 calls from said home. Does the home, the children's home, face any liability?
I mean, there are always ways to have liability, and you know, we talk about liability a lot, and we talk about accountability a lot, and certainly there are civil lawsuits, but the reality of it is, rather than these lawsuits, we have to look at the institutional structures that create this pipeline that puts individuals at risk. And when we're talking about groups homes specifically, we're talking about folks that have been placed there, that are in the dependency system. These are children that are at risk for one reason or another, either from their own behavior, for things like failing out of school or engaging in dangerous conduct, or being in households where adults or guardians can't take care of them. And when they're in that guardianship process and in that pipeline, the courts are actually responsible for placing them, and those group homes actually must act as their guardian. And so the things that you're talking about in the group homes, where the standard of care seems to be diminished in that group home for children, and they are at risk for whatever reason, and there are a number of recorded calls indicating danger at that location that's concentrated, not only is that a public safety risk that the police should be looking into, but that's a risk that the courts have responsibility for as well. So when those reports come back to the court, and they should be coming back to the court and following the children that are associated with that address, that's an issue for the court to take up, and that's an issue that frequently gets taken up not just in the dependency system, which is a civil system, but also in the criminal tract system. And that's when you get probation officers and parole officers, or probation officers because it's juveniles, coming in and giving reports not just on the kids, but on the location itself, and indicating, as is their charge, whether or not this is a safe place for children to be kept and what's going on with that location. Are people actually getting better and being served and protected in that location?
Now, Paul, speaking of the foster home, 3 Democratic Congresspeople are requesting that a federal investigation into the foster care system in the wake of the police killing of Ma'Khia Bryant. What are some of the issues the investigation would focus on, and could it apply to the case in Florida?
Well, absolutely, because what they're talking about is how are these homes being licensed? Who is caring for them? What are the agencies that are charged with making sure that they're being safe throughout the entirety of the pipeline? First of all, how they're being created, how they're being staffed and managed, and then how are they being monitored internally at a federal level? If and when they receive federal dollars, that's a fair question. The bigger issue, though, I believe, are the local standards, because they're the ones that are interacting more readily with these agencies. And a lot of them are individually run, but some of them are run collectively, and there are agencies that run several group homes throughout an entire area, and oftentimes that crosses state lines, and there are some national organizations that do these things. Those have to be monitored and evaluated at a local level on a case-by-case basis, because each one is different. And to me, what we were talking about earlier is when we have a concentration in a specific group home or with a specific child, there's been an indication that there's a problem, numerous calls about violence, for example. Or if, for example, there's a location where a lot of the kids are walking away from that location, someone has to be evaluating what the rules and standards are in order to ensure that the children that are placed at that facility are safe, and that the community is safe as well. So a lot of the things that they're looking for are things like, are there arson reports, are fires, or a high spike in crime associated with that location as well? These are all the things that the calls now for action want to review to figure out, do we need broader institutional practices to make sure that that happens, and it doesn't just get caught on the back end after there's been a terrible incident and the system has failed, because that failure is measured in the individuals who are assigned to that location that have slipped through the cracks and been exposed to broader danger, as we saw in the case that we were talking about, where individual charges face risk and lethal outcomes because the systems have failed them. That's the problem.
Yeah. All right, BNC's legal contributor and veteran prosecutor Paul Henderson, thanks again, and we're going to see you later on in the hour.
Looking forward to it, Yodit.